I am the Major League Assistant Strength Conditioning Specialist with the Milwaukee Brewers. I've been in professional baseball I just finished my 7th season, so 7 years. My first 6 seasons, I was with the St. Louis Cardinals in the minor league system. And this was my first year with the Milwaukee Brewers, also my first year in the major league level. I would say the Springfield College strength conditioning program, especially the master's program, which is what I did, I think it greatly prepared me for, going off and getting a full-time job in the field, and really the rigors of what it means to be a full-time strength conditioning coach. The program is extremely, and I talk about this often with friends and coworkers who did not go to Springfield, that the program, one of the best things about it is how practical it is, hands-on. A lot of our classes were in the weight room itself. We were obviously learning about things from an academia standpoint, but then we would say, all right, this is what we know. Now let's go, grab a rack, grab a partner or two, and then now let's coach, try this out, work on these cues. So it's an amazing balance of the, academia textbook side of things, but then especially hands-on practicality of it. And especially because you do internships in the weight room with the university athletic programs, you just get so much experience hands-on, and it really prepares you for once you go off into the field. So for me, what made Springfield College stand out was, as I mentioned previously, the practicality and the hands-on approach that they have with the program, and truly just the connections that come with being a Springfield College alum. The field is just saturated with alums, strength and conditioning, just really anything sports performance. You always run into someone from Springfield College, and that's automatically just something you bond over. It's something that you may not know a person, but as soon as you find out, it actually happened to me about a week ago. We were in Milwaukee playing the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I just briefly heard someone mention, the head athletic trainer, Springfield College guy, and I was like, oh my gosh. And obviously I did my best to try to go introduce myself. So it's one of those things where it's just a great bond. It's something that we take great pride in, no pun intended, being the Springfield College pride. But in sports, you often run into Springfield College alums in many different realms, and that's automatically something that gives you a connection, and it can be beneficial, especially when you're trying to, get to a certain position. Those connections are extremely valuable because it's not only that they know you're a Springfield College guy or gal, but they know that you more than likely have something special that helps you stand out from the experiences, because the program is very rigorous. Like, there's a high expectation and demand on us, but that's a big factor in helping prepare us for the future. Strength and conditioning for me, I actually tell this story a good amount when I speak with especially young aspiring strength coaches. When I was entering my senior year of high school, I started lifting weights with one of my good friends from high school. We were on the football team. So I was 16 years old, and obviously I was thinking, all right, I want to get stronger for my senior year of football. And me and my buddy were extremely dedicated. We were at the gym almost daily at the YMCA in my hometown. And it's funny because I always say we were extremely dedicated, but we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. Every day we were max benching. Every day we were max, this and that. And so obviously I didn't have the education. But for me, I remember one day, I believe he was like the head personal trainer at that YMCA. I had seen him all the time, and he was next to us training one afternoon. And I just briefly mentioned, I asked him, I said, hey, if you don't mind me asking, how did you become a personal trainer? Did you get certifications? And he told me, actually, I have a degree in this. And for me, I always thought personal trainers were pretty much just certifications. And he says, I have a degree in this. And I said, a degree? He says, yes, I have a degree in exercise science. I got my degree from Southern Connecticut State University, one of the local state schools. And this was the first time I've ever heard of that. And at that time, entering my senior year, I obviously had been thinking about the future, what do I want to do with my life? If I go to university, what do I want to study? So for me, that was a huge turning point where I said, whoa, exercise science, like that seems like something I would love. So I ended up getting into Central Connecticut State University, and I declared exercise science as my major. And I thought I wanted to be a personal trainer early on. And I'll never forget a few weeks into my freshman year, my first semester, it was intro to exercise science at Central. And my professor, this was a huge turning point for my life. My professor, he had assigned our class a group assignment. There were about 20, 22 of us in the classroom. And he says, everyone's going to pair up and each of you are going to choose one area related to the exercise science field. And you're going to present about 10 minutes on it so that everyone else can kind of get a glimpse into, you know, different avenues you can take. Because exercise science was a little more general and broad. In my classes, you know, for the presentations, people were presenting on nutrition. Maybe they wanted to go to nutrition master's program afterwards, physical therapy, you know, different avenues like that, physical therapy, occupational therapy. So I remember I rose my hand and I asked the professor, I said, Doc, I would love to present on athletic training. And he looked confused and he said, athletic training? And I said, yeah, I want to be an athletic trainer after college. And he said, Dan, I'm sorry, man. If athletic training is what you want to do, you're in the wrong field. You need to switch majors. And I remember I was like a little frustrated with that response, because I remember thinking to myself, what have I been doing for these few 5 weeks? Like, I'm just wasting my time here. Like, what am I doing? And I said, no, like I'm in the right field. He says, athletic training is different than exercise science. And I said, no, I want to train athletes. I want to be an athletic trainer. And he chuckled, because that's a very common misconception. And he just chuckled and he said, that's very common. People get those things mixed up. He said, what you're talking about is strength and conditioning. You want to be a strength conditioning coach. And I said, I was 17. I didn't know much. And I said, strength conditioning coach, what's that? And he says, you know, they train athletes in a team setting. He was like, it's almost like a personal trainer, but you work with athletes and sports performance. And I said, that's exactly it. And he says, yes, if strength and conditioning, this is my first semester of undergrad. He said, if strength and conditioning is what you want to do, Springfield College is where you want to go. And I said, what's that? Where's Springfield College? And my undergrad is in New Britain, Connecticut. So Springfield, he said, oh, Springfield College is only about an hour north of here. And he says they have one of the best programs in the country, if not in the world, for masters in strength conditioning. And he had actually been a Springfield alum. He did his master's and his PhD there. So obviously he was speaking from experience. So that day on, I told myself, I'm going to go get a master's in strength conditioning from Springfield College. And, you know, I had that on my mind and I worked for it. And thank God, you know, everything happened the way it did. And here I am. So that's kind of how I got into strength conditioning, and my love of the weight room and exercising on a personal level and training. Having been an athlete growing up and always been involved in athletics, for me, it was just something that was almost seamless. And I'm very grateful for where I am today. You know, strength conditioning, and it has allowed me to impact athletes. I think the best story I can give, it actually might be a surprise to most when I say this, but in 2019, as I had mentioned earlier, I was with the Cardinals in the minor league system. And I was at the AA level of the minor leagues, which is one of the higher minor league levels. And the Cardinals AA affiliate is in Springfield, Missouri. So I was in Springfield that season. And every summer, the organization, that club, does like a kids camp. So I believe it's a Friday, Saturday, like it's a free camp for local kids. Hundreds of kids sign up. And there were probably ages 8 to 12, 8 to 13. But there must have been at least 250 kids that came in. And that was about a 2-3 hour camp in the late morning, early afternoon. So the camp was broken up into different groups and they just rotated. So they each went through each station once. And, you know, the stations were like a hitting station, pitching station, fly ball station, you know, ground ball station, base running station. And then I was responsible for whatever I wanted. And I said, I would love to do like a warm-up mobility station, like to teach the kids how to kind of prepare for their games. And the day was going on and I'm cycling through, and the youngest group, the like 7, 8, 9-year-olds were like the biggest challenge, because for them to sit still for 15, 20 minutes was like asking a lot. So I learned a lot in that experience. It was a great experience. So once the day's all said and done, at the conclusion of the camp, we were all sat at a few tables, and there were about maybe 7 or 8 of our players that had, came in that morning to help with the stations. And the kids loved it because our players were people that they watched at the games all the time, and they look up to them. So all the players and us coaches that were at the camps, we sat at tables, and basically whomever wanted to come through, which was almost everyone, would bring bats, balls, gloves, and have everyone sign it. And at the end, I'm sitting there and I'm signing things as well. And if there were 250 kids at that camp, I would say maybe less than 10 of them were females. There were a few like young girls at the camp. And there was one girl in particular, she might have been maybe 10 years old, and she was extremely athletic, and just like she was dominating every station. You can tell she was like a studette in athletics, and she was very like into everything. And at the end, she had come up to me. I was at the table as well, and her mother kind of nudged her and she said, "Go ahead, tell Coach Vega." And she says, "Coach Vega, you were my favorite station." And I said, "Really? That's cool." And her mom says she wants to be a strength conditioning coach when she grows up because of this. And I was just like, I wasn't expecting that. And that just caught me off guard. And I was just like, whoa, like to have that much of an impact on someone, and who's not to say in 10, 15 years, she'll be one of the leaders in strength conditioning in our field. So that meant so much to me, because you just never really know how much of an impact you might have on someone. And I was just being my authentic, just like having fun, goofy self, especially with the kids. And it was an amazing experience to be able to know that not only was I teaching them some things, but it impacted her that much for her to even consider like, wow, this might be something I can do one in the future. So I've done a lot of cool things. I've been around a lot of amazing athletes, and especially now being at the top level. But for me, that's always been something that stood out to me, because that is just something that I'll never forget, that feeling of just like, wow, I really had an impact on, that young lady in that situation. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah. So some advice I would give a potential young aspiring strength conditioning coach is, first and foremost, this field, especially early on, it is not a 9-to-5 job. It's very demanding from a time standpoint, personal, just a lot of aspects. There are a lot of sacrifices that come with it, especially if you want to get to an elite level of athletics, like many do. There are truthfully a lot of sacrifices that come with it. It's one of those things where, in my opinion, it's not easy, but it's worth it if it's something you're truly passionate about and you're really like dedicated and willing to make it happen. Another advice I would give a young strength coach is try to be strategic with your moves. That's something that I share with young aspiring strength coaches all the time. Be strategic with, if you have to do an internship for school, don't worry so much about like the logo on your chest. Like, I think everyone sometimes gets so enamored with trying to go to like a big program because it's such and such university. Oh my gosh. And I'm not trying to deter anyone from that. Like, if you really want to go for that, go for it. But I think of one of my best internship experiences was summer of 2013 under a fellow Springfield College alum, Coach Adam Fight. And it was in New Jersey at Reach Your Potential Training, which was a private facility. They were like barely 1 year old at the time. And it was just me and one other intern. And they were unknown at the time, as I'd mentioned. And that for me was probably the best internship I've ever done, because I got so much hands-on experience from Coach Fight and Coach Bobby Smith, the owner. They really taught me a lot and kind of threw me into the fire. And there were a lot of hardships in a sense of like, I made a lot of mistakes, but I also learned from them. And that for me was beneficial, where sometimes I remember coming back after that summer, we were speaking of our internship experiences, and some of my classmates, had gone to XYZ University, one of the biggest universities in the country, and they had really cool shirts and jackets and a lot of cool gear, but they said that their experience wasn't as great as they hoped for, because their role was simply set up the weight room, stand in the corner while the athletes train. All right, break it down and clean up the weight room, doing tasks like that. And so I'm not saying it's like that in every experience, but be strategic with all of your moves. If there's something that you aspire to work in, try to get your foot in that door early and just work towards it. Be patient. It takes time. It took me 6 years to get to the major league level. And even that, I mean, I'm grateful. I thank God for that, because that is very accelerated for probably the norm, I would say. And just work hard. If it's something that you really want, work hard for it. And if you give it your all, I always say my passion is what drives me and fuels me. If you're passionate about it, you're going to go very far. And it doesn't necessarily have to be at an elite level of a professional organization. Some people want to be a strength coach at a smaller school. And I mean, Springfield College is the perfect example. Springfield is a tiny school, and that was some of the best years of my strength conditioning career because of how close-knit the community was. And it was, I can walk across campus and get greeted by 12, 13 of my athletes just going to get a coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. So that was always a special feeling for me. So whatever you aspire to do, you can do it. Just, work hard for it and let your passion fuel you.